Good day, everyone. This is the continuation of our topic about Gordon Allport. Before anything else, allow me to introduce myself. I am Nerhata D. Salman, groupmate of Rani Mengrino. Now let's proceed to our topic, the study of the individual. Because psychology has historically dealt with general laws and characteristics that people have in common, Allport repeatedly advocates the development and the use of research methods that study the individual. Early in his writings, Allport distinguished between two scientific approaches, the nomothetic and idiographic. Nomothetic study general laws or principles aiming to establish universal truth and make broad prediction about groups, while idiographic refers to that which is peculiar to the single case, focused on understanding the unique aspect of individuals. Example is Freud's case study, The Little Hands. They explore the inner world of the individual in great depth. Now, let's proceed to the diaries of Marion Taylor. During the late 1930s, Allport and his wife, Ada, became acquainted with an extremely rich source of personal data about a woman whom they called Marion Taylor. The core of this data was nearly a lifetime of diaries, but personal information in Marion Taylor also included description of her by her mother, her young sister, her favorite teacher, two of her friends, and a neighbor, as well as notes in a baby book, school records, scores in several psychological tests, autobiographical material, and two personal meetings with Ada Allport. Nicole Barenbaum, 1997, has put together a brief account of Marion Taylor's life. Taylor was born in 1902 in Illinois, moved to California with her parents and younger sister in 1908, and began writing to her diary in 1911. Soon after her 13th birthday, her diary's entries become more personal, including fantasies and secret feelings. She eventually graduated from college, earned a master's degree, and became a psychology and biology teacher. She married at age 31 but had no children. Although a wealth of personal documents on Marion Taylor became available to Ada and Gordon Allport, the Allport chose not to publish an account of her story. Berenbaum, 1997, offered some possible reasons for this, but due to major gaps in the correspondence between Marion Taylor and Ada Allport, it is now impossible to know for certain why the Allport did not publish this case history. Their work with the Marion Taylor probably helped them organize and publish a second case, the story of Jenny Gove Masterson, another pseudonym. Letters from Jenny. Allport's morphogenic approach to the study of lives is best illustrated in his famous Letters from Jenny. These letters reveal the story of an older woman and her intense love-hate feelings toward her son, Ross. Between March 1926, when she was 58, and October 1937, when she died, Jenny wrote a series of 301 letters to Ross' former college roommate, Glenn, and his wife, Isabel, who almost certainly were Gordon and Ada Allport. Allport originally published parts of these letters anonymously and then later published them in more detail under his own name. Born in Ireland of Protestant parents in 1868, Jenny was the eldest in a family of 7 children that included 5 sisters and a brother. When she was 5 years old, the family moved to Canada, and then when she was 18, her father died and Jenny was forced to quit school and go to work to help support her family. After 9 years, her brothers and sister became self-supporting, and Jenny, who had always been considered rebellious, scandalized her family by marrying a divorced man, a decision that further alienated her from her conservatively religious family. After only 2 years of marriage, Jenny's husband died. A month or so later, her son Ross was born. This was 1897, the same year Gordon Allport, Ross' future college roommate was born. The next 17 years was somewhat contented ones for Jenny. Her world revolved around her son, and she worked hard to ensure that he had everything he wanted. She told Ross that aside from art, the world was a miserable place, and that is her duty to sacrifice for him because she was responsible for her existence. When Ross moved away to attend college, Jenny continued to scrimp in order to pay all his bills. As Ross began to be interested in women, the idyllic mother-son relationship came to an end. The two quarreled often and bitterly over his female friends. Jenny referred to each of them as prostitutes and whores, including the woman Ross married. With that married, Jenny and Ross became temporarily estranged. At about the same time, Jenny began an 11-and-a-half-year correspondence with Glenn and Isabel, Gordon and Ada, in which she revealed much about both her life and her personality. The early letters showed that she was deeply concerned with money, death, and Ross. She felt like Ross was ungrateful and that he had abandoned her for another woman and a prostitute at all. She continued her bitterness toward him until he and his wife were divorced. She then moved into an apartment next to Ross, and for a short time Jenny was happy. But soon, Ross was seeing other women, and Jenny inevitably found something wrong with each other. Her letters were filled again with animosity for Ross, a suspicious and uh, cynical attitude toward others, and a morbid yet dramatic approach to life. 3 years into the correspondence, Ross suddenly died. After his death, Jenny's letters expressed a somewhat more favorable attitude toward her son. Now she did not have to share him with anyone. Now she was safe, no more prostitutes. For the next 8 years, Jenny continued writing to Glenn and Isabel, and then usually answered her. However, they served mostly as neutral listeners and not as advisors or confidants. Jenny continued to be overly concerned with death and money. She increasingly blamed others for her misery and intensified her suspicions and hostility towards her caregivers. After Jenny died, Isabel or Ada commented that in the end, Jenny was the same, only more so. These letters represents an unusual rich source of morphogenic material. For years, they were subjected to close analysis and study by Allport and his students who sought to build the structure of a single personality by identifying personal disposition that were central to that person. Allport and his students used three techniques to look at Jenny's personality. First, Alfred Baldwin, 1942, developed a technique called personal structure analysis to analyze approximately one-third of the letters. Personal structure analysis usually refers to examine the unique organization of traits, behavior, thoughts, or psychological components that make up an individual's personality or psychological profile. It's more aligned with idiographic approaches in psychology, since it focuses on the individual's internal structure rather than general laws. To analyze Jenny's personal structure, Baldwin used two strictly morphogenic procedures, frequency and contiguity, for gathering evidence. Frequency is how often two stimuli or events occur together, while contiguity is the closeness in the time or space between two events. The first simply involves a notation of a frequency with which an item appears in the case material. For example, how often did Jenny mention Ross or money or herself? Contiguity refers to the proximity of two items in the letters. How often did the category Ross unfavorable occur in close correspondence with herself self-sacrificing? Freud and other psychoanalysts intuitively use these techniques of contiguity to discover an association between two items in a patient's unconscious mind. Baldwin, however, refined it by determining statistically those correspondence that occur more frequently that could be expected by chance alone. Using the personal structure analysis, Baldwin identified three clusters of categories in Jenny's letters. The first related to Ross, woman, the past, and herself, self-sacrificing. The second dealt with Jenny's search for a job, and the third cluster revolved around her attitude toward money and death. The three clusters are independent of each other, even though a single topic, such as money, may appear in all three clusters. Second is Jeffrey Page, 1966, used a factor analysis to extract primary personal disposition revealed by Jenny's letters. In all, Page identified 8 factors: aggression, possessiveness, affiliation, autonomy, familial acceptance, sexuality, sentience, and martyrdom. Page's study is interesting because he identified 8 factors, a number that corresponds very well with the number of central dispositions, 5 to 10, that Allport had earlier hypnotized would be found in most people. The third method of studying Jenny's letters was a common sense technique used by Allport 1965. It is a method often used in social psychology and other behavioral sciences to gather or interpret informations based on everyday intuitive reasoning. Basically, the kind of understanding regular people might have without scientific training. His results are quite similar to those Baldwin and Page. Allport asked 36 judges to list what they thought of Jenny's essential characteristics. They recorded 198 descriptive adjectives, many of which were synonymously and overlapping. Allport then grouped the terms into 8 clusters. First, quarrelsome, suspicious. Second, self-centered or possessive. Third, independent, autonomous. Fourth, dramatic, intense. Fifth, aesthetic, artistic. Sixth, aggressive. Seventh, cynical, morbid. And eighth, sentimental. Comparing this common sense clinical approach with Page factorial study, Allport, 1966, presented some interesting parallels. Through Jenny's letters, then we find that she possessed about 8 central traits that characterize the last 12 years of her life, if not her entire life. She was aggressive, suspicious, possessive, aesthetic, sentimental, morbid, dramatic, and self-centered. These central dispositions were sufficiently powerful that she was described in similar both by Isabel or Ada Allport, who knew her well, and by independent researchers who studied her letters. The close agreement between Allport's common sense clinical approach and Page factor analytic method does not prove the validity of either. It does, however, indicate the feasibility of morphogenic studies. Psychologists can analyze one person and identify central disposition with consistency even when they use different procedures. Now, let's proceed to understanding and reducing prejudice. Prejudice is a preconceived opinion or judgment about a person or group that is not based on actual experiences or reason. It's often negative, but it can also be positive, though still based on stereotypes. Allport was interested in prejudice and developing ways to reduce racial prejudice was of the utmost importance to him. Allport, 1954, proposed that one of the most important components to reduce prejudice was contact. If members of majority and minority groups interact more under optimal conditions, there would be less prejudice. This become known as the contact hypothesis. Contact hypothesis, also known as the intergroup contact theory, is a psychological theory that suggests that under the right condition, direct contact between members of different social groups can reduce prejudice and improve intergroup relations. Contact hypothesis and the optimal conditions were relatively simple. 1. Equal status between the two groups. 2. Common goals. 3. Cooperation between groups. And 4. Support of an authority figure, law, or customs. For example, if African American and European American neighbors got together to form a neighborhood watch group with the common goal of making their neighborhood safer, and such a program was endorsed by the mayor or city police department, then this interaction and group effort would be likely to lead to reduce prejudice among residents of the neighborhood. Now, let's proceed to intrinsic and extrinsic religious orientation. Allport believed that a deep religious commitment was a mark of mature individual, but he also believed that not all churchgoers have a mature religious orientation. Some, in fact, are highly prejudiced. Allport, 1966, offered a possible explanation for this frequently reported observation. He suggested that church and prejudice offer the same safety, security, and status, at least for some people. Those people can feel both comfortable and self-righteous with their prejudicial attitudes and their church attendance. To understand the relationship between church attendance and prejudice, Allport and J. Michael Ross, 1966, developed the Religious Orientation Scale, or ROS, which is applicable only for churchgoers. The ROS consists of 20 items, 11 extrinsic and 9 intrinsic. Example of extrinsic items are the primary purpose of prayer is to gain relief and protection. What religion offers me most is comfort when sorrow and misfortune strike, and one reason for my being a church member is that such membership helps to establish a person in the community. Example of intrinsic items include my religious belief are what really lie behind my whole approach to life, and I try hard to carry my religion over into all my other dealings in life. Next is the critics to Allport. Allport theories, while foundational, had been criticized for being overly descriptive, lacking empirical rigor, and focusing too heavily on individual traits without fully accounting for social and environmental influences. So, in his trait theory criticism, Alport's theory of personality emphasizes individual traits, example cardinal, central, and sectorial traits, but it lacked scientific rigor. He focused more on description rather than prediction. His theory didn't clearly explain how traits develop or how they interact. His approach was idiographic, which some argued lack generalizability, hard to apply across large group. Second is contact hypothesis criticism. His theory that intergroup contact reduce prejudice is still widely respected, but contact only works under ideal conditions, equal status, common goals, support from authority, etc., which are rarely in real-life situations. It assumes people are rational enough to change prejudice views through contact, doesn't always account for deep-seated biases or systemic power imbalances. Critics say it may oversimplify complex social dynamics. Third, lack of experimental evidences. Allport's work, especially early on, was theoretical and philosophical. It didn't always include empirical research or testable hypotheses, which become a bigger issue as psychology become more scientifically driven. Next is overemphasis on the individual. Allport focused a lot on individual differences. Some psychologists, especially from more social and behaviorist perspectives, argue that he underestimated the role of environment, culture, and social systems in shaping personality and prejudice. Last is historical limitation. While forward-thinking for his time, some of Allport's ideas on race, religion, and prejudice are seen as limited by the cultural lens of 1950s. Gordon Allport's concept of humanity reflects a deeply humanistic and optimistic view of people. He believed that humans are uniquely individual, rational, and capable of growth. Um, Here's the breakdown of how he viewed human nature. Number one, humans are uniquely individual. Allport emphasizes the idiographic approach, studying the individual in depth. He believed every person has a unique personality structure that can't be fully understood through general laws alone. He valued personal narratives, goals, and self-perception. Number two, people are rational and purposeful. Allport saw people as rational beings who act with intentions and meaning. He believed behavior is not just a reaction to past experiences, but often guided by conscious goals and future plans. This is known as functional autonomy. Third, capacity for growth and selfhood. He believed in personal growth, maturity, and self-awareness. His idea of mature personality includes traits like self-extension, caring about others, emotional security, realistic perception of life, a sense of humor, uh, a unifying philosophy of life. And last, number 4, human dignity and morality. Allport was deeply concerned with prejudice, ethics, and social justice. He believed understanding human nature was essential for building a more tolerant and compassionate society. So that is all for our topic about Gordon Allport. I hope you learned something, and thank you for listening.